although we are meeting in this setting, current socially distancing rules still apply, and masks should be worn when not seated. I'd like to welcome all officers to the meeting and also Cabinet Member Councillor Robert Reid. If you wish to ask a question, please indicate to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Sarah Trotter. This meeting will be recorded and the recordings retained in accordance with the Council's document retention policy. Cabinet Member Councillor Annie Mason is unable to join us today, and therefore a COVID update prepared by Carol Drury will be circulated separately. First item on the agenda is comments from members of the public. Seb, are there any comments from members of the public?
No, not today, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence and replacement members.
Yes, Councillor Exton has given his apologies, and Councillor Jackie Smith will be in attendance as a substitute for this meeting only.
Thank you very much indeed, Seb. For those who may know or may not know, Councillor Exton was in hospital a few weeks ago, and I'd like to send him our best wishes on behalf of the committee. He is a member of this committee and normally attends every meeting, so my best wishes go to him. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members who have any interest to declare? Only those of a pecuniary nature are needed to be declared. Are there any interest to be declared? No. Action notes. Item 4 for the meeting of the 11th of March. For accuracy only, I'll go through them page by page. Page 2, page 3. Just those 2 pages. Do I have a proposal that a true record of the minutes on the 11th of March? Sarah, Councillor Trotter, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Knowles, thank you very much. All those in favour that were here? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you. Item 5, updates from the previous meeting. That's on page 11 to 12. I can report that all action notes are complete. Are there any questions from members of the committee? No, we'll move on then to item 6, compliance update. This is for noting only and to receive an update at a later date. No vote is required. Who's going to present this report? Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I could have given you quite a lengthy script under updates, but I have chosen to sort of do it as we go through the agenda because we've got quite a long agenda. But I will say it, and I will say it again and again, that this is my opportunity to use this committee to help me, in particular with housing issues, and I value the comments and the support that I get from what I'm actually told. I would like to first of all mention about the social housing regulator. Indeed, where we are at the moment, we have had a very favourable review at the beginning of this week. We have a long way still to go. It is anticipated that we are likely to be with the housing regulator for some 18 months. Our compliance is coming along really well. Our fire regulation assessments, we promised that they would be done by the end of the month. Forgive me, Chairman, I've got 2 left to do, but we had 173. We've done 169. There was 4 left, and today we've done 2 of them, so we've got 2 left for tomorrow. Our gas surveys, we have the difficult ones still, and those are the ones that won't give us access. And indeed, those are the ones that we are having to use the court to gain access to get into them. We have 42 of those cases. They have reduced. but we are needing magistrate support in gaining access, and believe you me, we will gain access to do
Councillor
so.
Reid, can I just come in there? Can you tell the committee the reasons why we can't get into these projects? It's simply a high number that we can't get into.
The reason that we can't get into those is because they just will not communicate with us. And we have tried firstly by letters, secondly by door knocking, thirdly, they just aren't there, and we are having those problems.
Do any of those apply to the Riverside flats?
I've got a feeling there's two in particular that belong to the Riverside flats. To answer to you.
Councillor Reid, sorry, just a quick question. Do you have the data that the sort of, how can I word, repeat properties that won't gain, you're allowed to gain access? You know, is there a history from before COVID that you couldn't get entry to check the gas? Or could you find out?
The situation was concurrent during COVID, obviously. This has been a method of working through these and getting them down. We are literally, we were on 90 odd, we are now down to the real difficult ones that we are still having this problem with. And that's why we're needing the magistrates to help us with those. Am I correct, Director?
Yes, just to support what Councillor Reid is saying there, that it is typical that a small number of tenants will refuse to give access at the first go. Most landlords experience that, and it does tend to be a bit of a pattern then with those households. So that's why it's important to use that information from previous years to help decide what's the best route. Of course, with the closure and the delays with the magistrate system through COVID, that has meant that there's an accumulation of quite a high number, and that's common with all landlords at this point. Generally, gas servicing is one of the key performance indicators that's really suffered through the pandemic because of that inability to use that legal route.
Councillor Reid, are you happy to answer questions as we go through this report, because it could be quite lengthy?
I would like, if I'm allowed, to present various pieces of information which will expand on the compliance update, and indeed including the social housing regulator and the other things. I would then like to offer my report and actually give you an update, because there's several things. I'm sorry it's going to take some time, but it is a very important situation, and then like to sort of take questions at the end if we could go about it that way.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So the good news is that all of our other compliance issues are now 100%. So we've got water there where Legionella is concerned. We've got asbestos. We've got the various things, the other components that are all 100% compliant where compliance regulations is concerned. Of course, we've got something else that we're going to undertake. There is first, we're going to have a peer support challenge, and it's going to last. We're going to have an initial one for 2 weeks that's going to look at the way that it's going to look right across the authority, but clearly it's going to look at housing. And indeed, it's going to look at how we've actually come to this arrangement on our compliance issues and how we fulfilled them. There was a peer review done, I understand, some 10 years ago. So that was some time before I actually became part of the council. I understand that this is something that should become a public document, but I do not know the reason for why it never did 10 years ago. The 2 weeks is a way of introducing what is coming, and we are going to undertake a full peer review in November.
Councillor Reid, I will stop you there on the peer review, because I was the councillor who was Jackie Smith, the council at the time, and I know that the peer review was not published deliberately. So I'm hoping this time that it will be transparent for all of us to look at.
Well, I'm really pleased, Chairman, because we're both coming from the same page, so that's really great. Okay, so where we are with the compliance update, I've given you the progress of where we are with the fire risk assessments. We do, of course, have the Earlsfield estate, and of course that has got issues for us. There is 154 properties on the estate, and previously warm air heating systems had been removed. There's a number of surveys that have happened over the past few years, tackling the project, and the estate-based approach is something that we are now doing. We have, of the asbestos surveys, we have and the joint tenancy surveys, which is not just about asbestos, it's also about the electrics in them, and it's about bathroom upgrades and kitchen upgrades. We've done 143 of those already in the 6 weeks, so we haven't got very many more to go. We then have to organise to bring back to finance the extra costs, because we've got to decant people whilst we do the work, and we're going to do them in batches of 6, and then they have to be reinstated, and of course there's compensation for that. So it's quite a big undertaking, but most importantly, we are going to do it as a project. We are going to do it as a project team. We're going to use One Void Properties, the office there, from Monday to Friday, so that the members of the Earlsfield estate will have always Monday to Friday access for information. And indeed, it's I can announce that the gentleman on my left is leading the project team. So we will probably come back to that later, but that's what I've got to tell you. The compliance software, which is known as Propeller, is now operational and capturing and providing real-time compliance data. So what I'm trying to say to everybody there is I'm hoping that these data records will not ever fall behind again. Both the rant and rave and the Propeller systems will be demonstrated to the compliance group on the 6th of July, so that'll be next week, and then I'll be rolling out how they're going to work in due course through an all members briefing. Further meetings have taken place with the regulator, as I've mentioned, and the HSC, which we have been in dialogue, useful dialogue about Earlsfield. But it's very important, Chairman, to say that we've used the opportunity to ask where is an update, a report on the Riverside. I'm sorry, they are telling us that it is not yet ready. So it isn't that we are delaying it or indeed not wanting to address anything that's still outstanding. If I've got my P's and Q's in the right order, I'm hoping most of the things, when it does come, I will already have seen to. I was at the Riverside this afternoon inspecting the well-being of those premises. Staffing issues are currently causing me some issues, particularly with sickness and vacancies, and they are being a real challenge at the minute, but we are dealing with a culture of change. And I can assure you that I will continue the culture change in partnership with the director, and we will have an assistant director of housing shortly, because we have got 3 shortlisted, and we will be coming to employment committee hopefully first week August, I think. So we will be hopefully having a further strength there. So a further update will be tabled for your good sales, as is always, at our next meeting. I think really I could speak half of the afternoon on compliance, but that wouldn't be terribly wise of me. So I'd like to suggest that I answer questions, Chairman, on the compliance agenda that we have. You've mentioned that it's not really for debate, but there's the update. If there's any particular questions quickly I could answer that are relevant, I'd be pleased to do so.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. It seems very good news to me. You've mentioned Grantham twice today, but have you got any news for our members from the south at all?
Sorry, Chairman, I don't quite understand the question. I'm talking about the whole of the housing district.
That's right, yes. But
yeah, I am not just particularly Grantham.
You've got nothing, yeah, right.
I've
You've got
nothing
to
else
report
particularly
on
to tell you.
Stanford or Bourne.
The only thing that I do have, and I will be talking about it, is I do have some new news on voids, which I'll speak through the meeting, and indeed on the criteria of new housing, particularly for Wellington Way, which will be market deeping and what will actually be built in due course in the meeting.
Good, thank you. Members of the committee, I now open it up to questions. First one is from Councillor Rosemary Kaberry-Brown.
I've pressed this and it's not. Oh, yes. Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Could you put your microphone towards your face so we can hear you?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask Councillor Reid, because I probably should know this, but I don't. Have we got any houses at all in our stock or flats that have this cladding on them that we are supposed to be replacing, and how are we progressing, or have we already done it? Thank you.
Always a worry to all of us. No, we have no buildings with that cladding on. In fact, this authority doesn't have any buildings that are above 6 in height, stories in any event, but no, we don't.
That's good to hear. Rosemary, do you wish to come back at all?
No, I'm very pleased to hear that Councillor Reid is progressing so well. And I'd like to congratulate him. I will be even happier when we finish, when we sort out the staff problems, because I do feel that staff that's employed in housing, I know it's difficult for them. I know they have people to deal with that can be a little bit difficult, putting it mildly, but we must have people up there that have got sympathy and can show sympathy when various things happen in houses that the tenant can't help, and flooding or whatever, gas leaks and goodness knows what else. I would also ask at this point, the people that are well known for all the problems with the gas company, it's a gas company, can't remember its name now, but if it comes up for renewing the contract, is what I'm talking about, would we have some authority not to renew it again with the same company? Because we do seem to have, is it called Jubilee or Charity Bell or something? Liberty, I think it's called. The company that we're dealing with.
Yes, you're talking about Liberty, yes. Yeah.
I think it's called Liberty. And most of the people that I have to deal with in my ward do nothing but complain about it and say, why on earth did the contract be renewed again when they'd already been complaining? Now, I think perhaps we've got different people here dealing with things. Perhaps they'll go into it a lot more deeply. But it does seem to be kind of chaos half the time with that company. So if Robert could take note of that, and I'm sure he will, that's all I have to say. But I would like to congratulate him on what he's doing. And he seems to be doing it thoroughly. And at least we're all being told what's happening, which is absolutely 100% in my opinion.
You're correct, Rosemary. Information is key. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So what is necessary to note first is that we are looking at a cultural change in housing. And this is already happening, and I would expect this cultural change to continue during the lifetime term of this particular period. And I'm hoping that I will be entrusted to do it through that time. In respect of Liberty Gas, yes, everybody, I think, are like-minded as to what's been described. Change is sought, and we are in the process of tendering for their current lease arrangement is coming to exploration, and we are looking to other service providers.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Do you want to come back?
Yes, please, very quickly. I'm pleased to hear about that. When I was muttering on about a bell, I obviously meant Liberty Bell. That's how I coordinate things. So that's where it was Liberty Bell, and so it's Liberty Gas. But what I am saying is, can we as a council, or can we afford not to go with the cheapest when we have these tenders coming in? It isn't the cheapest that's the best. It's usually the people that you can look back on their performance, even if it's elsewhere in other authorities, and how well they stand up to being counted when it's doing the repairs and considering the residents. We're never going to get away with the fact that even in my little ward, where I haven't got a lot of council residents, but you promise them that if the heating's going to be done, now it won't be done in the winter, it'll be done in the summer. And lo and behold, February arrives and our people, whoever they are, turn up and say, well, we're doing it now, or we're doing it in 3 weeks. And they're cut off, they've no heat, they've no hot water. And, it could make a very laughable film, really. And it's not that we intend to do it. We, as councillors and the council, don't seem to have a say on it. I mean, these companies just arrive and say, we're doing it, and that's it. And you've given your word, and I certainly did, that it won't happen in the winter. And it does, because if you don't accept it, you don't get it done.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosemary. Rosemary, we've got the best people in the building here, Andrew Cotton and also Councillor Robert Reid, who are going to lead us forward, obviously conscious of value for money and service to the community. So who would like to answer that question from Rosemary?
Happy to come in, Chair, through you, of course. So, yeah, absolutely. In terms of contract management, the quality has to be a significant factor there. So, whenever we were looking at procuring a contract, there'd be that balance between quality and cost, and we'll make sure that we give the proper weight to quality. It's all about finding that value for money sweet spot between the two. But absolutely, in terms of any sort of customer-facing, front-facing service provider that's contracted to do work on the council's behalf, how that is managed and dealt with by the contractors is really important. And in terms of, I think Councillor Reid touched earlier on about the new rant and rave software in terms of that immediate customer feedback. That should really help us as we move forward, understanding the performance of contractors and being able to hold them to account in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Are there any further questions from the members? Philip.
Thank you, Chair. A more general question. I think we're all very happy to note the progress that's being made in many, many areas. There's 1 or 2 areas, outstanding gas and so on, but a lot of progress has been made. What are the areas that make us think that we'll be still in measures for the next 18 months? What are those areas that make us think 18 months longer before we are released from the measures that are currently imposed upon us? Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Reid.
Okay, I'll take you within about 2 minutes through the journey of the 18 months, because I think that is the best way to actually answer this. And it is indeed what I wrote down yesterday, pardon me, from what actually Karen Bradford told the housing staff yesterday at presentation.
Well, Councillor Reid, I've got one more question from Amanda Wheeler. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah,
and
if you
move
like,
on?
yeah.
Amanda.
Okay, I can get to that in a minute.
That's not for here, no. That's a later on the agenda. I must admit, I don't know what that means. So,
If I may suggest, we could pick that up at the end of the meeting if you consider it to be under any other business. We have got a progress report to be able to tell you on
okay,
that.
that's great. Are you happy with that, Amanda? Okay. Right, over to you then, Councillor Reid.
Okay, so the question is about the 18 months. When we're compliant, they're wanting to see that we remain compliant. They want to see that we start to operate a policy of right first time. They want to see us working with tenants, and they want us to be able to demonstrate what good looks like. They want to see I've made a position statement with us to say that we have started a very good sprint in the work that we've done, and that this needs to turn into a marathon along the way. They have inspected our monthly meetings. They will continue to make monthly meeting arrangements that the chief executive will respond to. And indeed, Andrew, as the director, has to give the team of compliance a weekly update. They've been particularly keen and examined our Skyline magazine. They've looked at the matrix of how we're compliant and our RAG rating. They have looked into our sheltered housing and the service that it offers. They have been looking into our letting times. They've been looking into our voids, and they have been looking into our waiting list times as well. So it's not until that they are completely satisfied with all of those things that they're actually going to sign us off in 18 months' time. Personally, I don't think it's a bad thing or necessarily a good thing, because what we're going to do is we're going to be working along those agenda lines now anyway. And if we get it right, and I'm sure that we're going to do, is we'll continue to do that thereon. So it is a good brain check. I understand the question, but that is the way the regulators work. And that's what the journey we're going to have to work with. Okay.
Are there any further questions on this item before I move on? Rosemary.
The information Councillor Reid has given us on the various things that we have to have achieved before we come out of special measures, is there any possibility of us having that printed out on a sheet of paper for us, a hard copy, so we can look at this, bring it to the meetings with us and tick them off as they get done? It was just something that it's handy for us to have if we're going to, for instance, parish council meetings, and somebody jumps up and says something, we can say, no, that's sorted out. That's now, we're out of measures on that.
Thank you, Rosemary. Councillor Reid.
We have adopted that policy already, and we have what's known as an improvements plan. And I'm going to ask, what version of improvements plan are we on now? I think it's number 34. Now, what I've done in previous meetings, Chairman, is I have published the improvements plan so that members can measure the improvements that we've made since the last time that we spoke about them. So I will see that we publish them again tomorrow, so that members can have a look at how they have moved forward since the last time. But that is the best way. Karen Bradford has been particularly helpful in actually segregating these, and actually the way the information is presented in priority, in categories, and before we even get to a RAG rating assessment. So they have become, over the journey of the 34 that we've done, they have become more logical and more sequential for people to be able to understand.
Thank you very much indeed. For myself, I can say, you know, this is moving forward, you know, and congratulations to yourself and Andrew for the way you're taking the council forward in this position. Certainly over the last year or two, we've had some very dark days in this council, and all I wanted it to move forward in one direction only. Thank you.
Chairman, I've just got one point of information on this. 3.1, it suggests you are told in there that that there will be a further determination to the work with the regulator. This is, as I've mentioned, the adjusted improvement plan and consideration to the key outputs by members. It's the next word, weekly. It's now changed to fortnightly. We used to have a weekly meeting for an hour, and we have now changed it to being a fortnightly one for an hour and a half, because we felt that that is more productive in the time zone. But when we do our reviews, because we're having them fortnightly rather than weekly, we need longer to actually move through with them. So that needs to be amended. At that, Chair, I don't have anything more to say or answer.
Right, I'm going to take one more question, and I'm then going to close the item down because we've been at now half an hour. Councillor Philip Knowles.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly, unless I've missed something along the way, the plans that have been notified to us before have been more statements of intent and action plans, and I think Karen accepted that was the case. And so if we're going to take information forward, can we have more action plans and achievement of action plans and object rather than just statements of good intent? Thank you.
I can't see why not. Councillor Reid?
I could amend the improvement plan to put improvement stroke action plan, because that's exactly what it is. It's an ongoing scenario of where we are and what actions are actually moving in green that are on the way, those that are in amber, and we've got a few still that are in red.
Thank you. Is that acceptable? Yeah, good. The actions at the bottom of the page are: one, that the committee notes the latest compliance position following the meeting which took place on the 28th of May 2021 with the regulator of social housing, and two, that the committee receives a further update report at its next scheduled meeting. I'm now going to move on to item 7. Item 7 is the housing consumer feedback policy. Now, this item has an exempt paper on there. I'm happy to debate it, but if anybody refers to the exempt paper, we will have to go into closed session. Who's going to? Councillor Reid.
Okay, right. I need to talk to you about this. It's obviously why it's on the agenda. There's two particular things. One is that it's got the social housing paper, white paper in it, which obviously we need to be compliant with, and that's one of the reasons that it is here. And of course, the other real reason is the Ombudsman code of practice as well. So to introduce this, Chairman, the social housing white paper, which is a Charter of Social Housing for Residents, was published on the 17th of November last year, and it sets out how the government will work with the regulator of social housing in strengthening the formal standards against which landlords are regulated. One of the key aspects of the Charter is for the residents to have their complaints dealt with fairly and properly. In conjunction with the social housing white paper, the Housing Ombudsman has introduced a new compliant handling code, which has been published July last year, and it is a requirement and not best practice to handle to handle complaints in accordance with this code. The proposed housing customer feedback policy in Appendix 2 sets out how our district authority and our housing services will deal with the customer feedback in the form of complaints, compliments and comments. And in the paper, not referring to it, we do have some compliments as well as the issues of complaints. And of course, comments are often actually helpful in the way forward. The new Housing Ombudsman scheme includes a new power enabling the Housing Ombudsman to issue a compliant handling failure order for non-compliance with the scheme or code. So there is a word of caution to us there. The draft feedback policy is consistent with the Ombudsman Complete Handling Code, but we may see changes if the social housing white paper is implemented and it contains an intention to remove the need for residents to go into a designated person, i.e. local council or MP, or wait for 8 weeks before a customer can approach the housing ombudsman with a complaint. So this is removing the democratic filter and making the procedure more fit for purpose. I hope I've been clear in that. I obviously put forward today the agenda. And of course, I will take any questions or answer them with my fellow director on my left. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. Before we move on, then, does any member wish to refer to the exempt paper? No? No, good. Right, I'm now going to open up for questions from the committee. Are there any questions? Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment rather than a question or part question. The policy looks fine. We've gone through it and it looks as it satisfies all the requirements. I hope as a body we don't get to the stage where we have a tick box policy and we tick all the boxes and do everything, but we lose the communication between the council and the individual. Robert knows that we've got a little issue, a very, very tiny issue in Bourne at the moment, but where communication seems to be lacking, and we're doing our best to try and solve it. And yet I'm sure the problem is solved, but the communication is good enough. I'm sure we've ticked all the boxes, but that communication with the person to make sure that the person feels that somebody is dealing with the problem and has dealt with it satisfactorily is far more important. I know we've got to tick boxes these days, but it's more important than ticking the box. Thank you.
It's having the right person in place to deal with that particular complaint, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Reid.
2 words I've mentioned this afternoon: cultural change. And that is what we're having to work at. And there's a perfect example of how we haven't yet made that cultural change, but my goodness, we shan't let off. And I need these remarks. I need people telling me when these cultural changes don't happen, because it's only by holding our officers to account that we're actually going to endorse what we're wishing to achieve.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mr. Chair. Oh.
There we go. Yeah, of course, happy to do so. And really, clearly, we've heard a lot about cultural change, and we were in having briefings with the whole directorate team yesterday, a couple of sessions. And one of the things that I was talking about was working in silos and people just seeing, you know, the only part of their job is to do X, Y, and Z. And it's helping people to understand that, you know, we are one team. If you're there on a repairs issue and you see something that looks like hoarding or safeguarding issue, you've got responsibility to pick up on that. Similarly, if you're there from the point of view of you know, tenancy management, If you see something that's a repair issue, then you should be picking up on that. So it is that, that representative of the council out as a frontline officer, being aware of what's happening and taking responsibility, not to necessarily resolve something, but to bring it back to the colleagues with the specialism that can.
Thank you. And Hilary.
Just looking at that, there's a new housing minister or housing ombudsman. Does the tenant, who obviously knows that there's a complaint going on anyway, do they have to go through the 8 weeks? Do they do the uplift to the ombudsman? And who is the man? Is he sitting somewhere in London? Or how do they deal with it? Because we obviously are reasonably educated people, or hopefully we are. And for somebody who isn't quite as educated and able to find their way through a minefield, is that something that you give them the information, or how does it work?
Yes, the housing ombudsman, it's not a man, clearly it's a big department. Their information is very much accessible, plain English. Their website is very easy to navigate for people that are online. Certainly routinely as part of our standard letters, we will refer to the ombudsman and give the contact details at the end of stage 2 within the proposed policy, because that's when then the ombudsman becomes relevant for stage 3. So that they are able as well to get support, not necessarily from the council in terms of being able to make the complaint for them, but in terms of making that contact with the ombudsman and the ombudsman service. There is the the intention in that white paper where that designated person role sort of falls away, but that would really remove it formally from the process, I guess. But there would still be a role for MP, local councillor in supporting their constituents. So I think there'd still be a role to play there, perhaps just a little less formally than is currently in the sort of requirements.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Any further questions before we move on? No. Right. The recommendations are, which is for noting really, it considers the content of the report in relation to the management of complaints, compliance and comments, reviews the proposed housing customer feedback policy, and makes any necessary recommendations or amendments to the report author prior to consideration by Cabinet. Are we all agreed that we've done that today? Are we all agreed? Good, good.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That's most helpful. It's coming to Cabinet with your comments also noted on the 13th of July. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Housing Service Assisting Gardening Maintenance Scheme. Now, many of you may have received an email that I sent you regarding a particular garden which myself and my wife regularly do food shopping for under the COVID-19 scheme. This particular house that you saw on, if you could open up the photograph, you cannot see the back of the garden because the chap is ill, unable to cope. And my concern is that we need to make sure that we are doing work for those who really need the work to be done and not those who can't be bothered to be done. So, Councillor Reid, do you want to present this, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're absolutely quite right. That is exactly the crux of the matter. It's about us actually, because the budget and the actual costs have increased significantly in the last year. Part of that was intentional. The rest of it is probably by exactly what you have described in people that don't actually need the assisted garden scheme. So what we're trying to do here is make the assisted garden scheme more fit for purpose. So the report seeks your committee's comments and suggestion on the proposed changes to the current scheme in terms of eligibility for the scheme and whether it is appropriate to recover the costs for providing the service to tenants. It is a point worth noting that some of the tenants that have this are on benefits and they can actually reclaim their monies. And of course, that keeps a rationale to the cost to the authority. So talking of rationale, the current proposals submitted in the report is due to be revised, is due to a revised service delivery with ESK, which I've mentioned in my brief, which is how we have seen an increase in the cost of works that have been completed through the scheme. And to expand further, 2021, the cost of the scheme was £77,762, and the cost of the scheme for 21 will be 194,712. So that's an increase of just shy of 117,000, which comes out of the HRA account. And there is my relevance, that if there is monies to actually that individual tenants can reclaim through their benefits, then that is actually a direct benefit to the housing revenue account because it will cost us less. So the specific criteria for acceptance onto the scheme needs to be agreed. It is proposed that all those tenants currently on the scheme will undergo a review. So we're going to look right across all of them from the scheme and have a look at exactly what we've all been discussing and saying. To assist with the additional spend and pressure on the HRA, we believe there are three options for consideration, which are detailed in section 3 of the report. So I hope I've made myself clear. I look forward to some deliberation and discussion about those options and what I'm actually going to be taking forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Before I open up to members, I'll take Amanda first. Before I open up to members, can you answer 2 points for me? And that is, why is the cost jumped from 72,000 to 194,000? And secondly, can you give assurance to the committee that no vulnerable person will be left out? Thank you.
Well, I'll answer that in reverse if I can, because it comes from the heart. My heart tells me, and you would all want, that no vulnerable person will be missed out and that they will be most earnestly considered. And that is something that we need to make sure our officers do actually undertake. As far as to the criteria as to why, I'm going to hand over to Director, because I'm beginning to feel I'm rather hogging the conversation here, and let him expand further.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So yeah, you've handed over to the one point that I haven't got an immediate answer for, which is
Okay, I can answer it. Okay, so when I took over, we were looking at a budgetary amount of somewhere around 77,000, and it had been reduced to that by budgetary monitoring and reducing it previously. I felt that at this level of expenditure, it was actually not addressing the purpose. However, what has happened is it's flipped the other way. So now we are needing to sort of do the review to actually get it stabilised. You know, and the other thing is it's the criteria of what the work was in there. Some of my housing officers were saying that a hedge cutting, which was done once a year, was actually really sort of a pruning. It wasn't a hard cutting back. So we've had to look also into the criteria of the work that's actually done, so that it's fit for purpose.
I'm concerned that those in need or are vulnerable may not want to pay and then just let their garden grow. What would you do with those tenants?
Well, I beg to be corrected by the director, but I think that would be their choice, Chairman.
I'm going to refer you now to a particular estate in Grantham, the Harrowby ward, which is currently untidy, is the polite word that I'll use. Are you going to accept that many more gardens may be untidy?
Well, I'll hand over to the director, but of course there is one thing about gardens is they mustn't be a neighbourly nuisance to their neighbours.
I've got an answer to that one. Thank you. Yes, so I think it's worthwhile just in terms of vulnerability, Chairman, if I may, just to sort of bring committee's attention to the criteria there that's detailed in the report, section 1.9. So that's very much looking at the criteria for the scheme, and those benefits that are mentioned there are very much linked to incapacity or disability. So it's approaching that from the point of view of sort of a physical reason, unable to undertake the works in the garden. There's also the option where someone's not on those benefits for proof of medical evidence to be supplied that the maintenance of the garden was something that couldn't reasonably be expected. I mean, it's clear in terms of that list of benefits as well, there's no direct sort of link between benefits and being able to pay for the scheme. Tenants may choose to use some of their benefits to do that, but there's no sort of direct benefit that they could access to do that. If there's a tenant that doesn't meet that eligibility and wouldn't be on the scheme, and their garden was in a condition where it was breaching the tenancy, so it was causing a nuisance, then the council as a landlord, as we do now, would have a decision to take in terms of enforcing the tenancy conditions. And we would always do that as a very last option. So we'd look at, is the property suitable? Would a transfer to accommodation without a garden be, in the best interest of all parties? We'd also consider the options of undertaking a one-off cut and recharging, for example. And then really, if you're ruling out those options, it moves into sort of tenancy enforcement. And again, there's a criteria there to think of the condition of the garden, how bad it is, and the impact on the neighbours. So that's probably a very long answer, but it's a complicated question, complicated scenarios that we're dealing with. I think I'd just repeat Councillor Reid's earlier comment that, in approaching this, if this is the eligibility that's set by the council in terms of this scheme, officers will approach that in the spirit of keeping people on the scheme, not finding a cheap reason, if you like, to exclude people that need our help and support. But what I think is really important is that we have a clear criteria that members set and that we can then implement. And that's really important, both in terms of officers dealing with issues and also, of course, the tenants, the people that live in our properties.
Thank you very much. I'll go to questions now. Philip's first question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Before we go on to criteria and who miss out and who won't miss out and whether they should pay, because this paper suggests that we might consider that, not necessarily consider that. We might leave it as it is. We've got to look at the background of the report. And the background of the report is a farce, because the cost is not a cost, it's a charge. The charge is from an incestuous charge between an SK company, SK Environment, and the council. And I would want to know, before I let anything of this go through, I want to know how many hours, what the hourly charge is by SK Environment to the council, how many hours they plan for each cut, why it will be 5.5 hours to cut every hedge, all the detail that goes into thinking of 176,000. The numbers of gardens doing come down in the last 3 years from 585 to 514 to 501. And yet, as you pointed out quite correctly, Chair, the cost of those cuts has gone up from 70-odd thousand to 190,000, which is 150% increase on a reducing requirement. Now, that is clearly a nonsense. No company in the world would ever accept that as a fact and put it down as a fact. The thing you would do, if that is the charge from SK Environment, you would challenge that charge and take that work elsewhere. I've done some work in Bourne. It's not scientific, but I've rung a lot of people in Bourne about what they pay for have their gardens cut. And a back and front ranges from £14 to £25 for a standard size home. A lot of the council tenants will be much smaller than that, and therefore should not be as much as that. But I personally pay £14 for front and back on a cut, whatever else. The average here is £30 a cut, just less. It's £29.50 a cut. And there's no reason in this earth that we should be looking to pay SK Environment £29.50 per cut of grass and £86 for a hedge cut. So we've got to look at the basic figures. We're fine, we go on to how we look at it with regard to our tenants. But before that, those figures cannot be right and cannot be accepted. Because if that is the case, then I can get everyone in Bourne, I don't know how many are in Bourne, but I can get everyone in Bourne for less than £20 an hour. And this is quite clearly extortionate. And it's a way of SK Environment pushing up their revenue figures artificially. Yesterday we had the finance and we talked about SK Environment and whatever, and they were showing how the revenue was going up and how they were allocating it to various things. I'd like to know where they allocate this revenue, because if allocated is revenue to the external revenue, which is really not the bins and all that, whatever else, then this is an artificial way of making SK Environment look very profitable and then trying to charge tenants who are the least able to pay for the privilege of having SK Environment cut their gardens. If anybody in Bourne wants a garden cut and we can get it cheaper than SK Environment, apparently can give it to us. These base figures have got to be considered again and looked at and challenged. And has it gone to tender? Has this work gone to tender? Of course it's not. It's gone to SK Environment. And if they can't do it profitably, sensibly and make a profit out of it, they shouldn't be doing it. So I'll start off with that. I'll come back later, if I may, about criteria and who should pay and who shouldn't pay, and on that basis. But before we get onto that, I believe we should look at, you raised it in the first place. Why has it gone up from 70,000 to 190,000? That's not a cost. It is not a cost. That's a charge. The costs are what we pay in manpower and what we pay with machines and what we pay with lorries going out to these things. They are costs. This is a charge from an incestuous charge from one company, a private company within SKDC to SKDC, and it should not be allowed.
I know, Philip, you're really into finance. I'm not, but I did have a look to see what the average charge in the Grantham area was for gardening. And it quite surprised me really, because it was £28 an hour. So in Bourne, you're really cheap. Could I ask either Councillor Reid or Andrew to respond to those points, please?
Yes, I'd like us both to, in part. I'm slightly smiling because I'm guilty of something. What I'm guilty of is I've increased the cost this year myself by insisting that when the garden's grass is cut, it's collected and it's taken away. So I've increased the costs myself there, as indeed I've alluded to. I've listened to my housing officers, and from having a quick trim to having a proper prune on hedging. But with that, I'll hand over to Andrew, if I may.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, in terms of the number of cuts, I understand that that's 14 a year with one hedge cut. Don't have for committee any sort of hourly breakdown or the number of hours that are spent. Happy to get that information and of course share that with committee.
14 a year, that's quite high, because the county council, we only cut the verges 3 times a year, and within the Grantham town area, the special expense area, we're cutting the verges 12 times a year. So why 14?
I think it's 14 as a maximum, so it's once a fortnight for 6 months. It's the sort of rule of thumb on that, I believe.
But you wouldn't cut the grass in the winter, would you?
No, it's cut over the summer.
That's Reid.
It was 11 and I've moved it to a maximum of 14. And also I have been a bit pernickety in that I've asked for the grass to be cut shorter in the spring, not so short in the middle of the summer when it would go brown, and to be cut shorter again in the autumn as part of the criteria.
your answer.
Yes, it is, because we actually get a contractual figures at the outset of accepting their services and how their charges are made up. So I'm quite happy to share those with you good people. There's no reason at all for why that shouldn't actually happen.
Rosemary, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I really wanted to just come back and say that originally I thought we were discussing why money had gone from one place, which is us, back into SK Environments. And then we've taken that on to starting about garden grass cutting. And then someone else was talking about very recently on cutting grass on the side of the estates. So, because one was saying it's done 12 times a year, someone's doing it 14 times a year. So I would like to get back to the part where we're supposed to be looking at residents' gardens. And are we just offering a service for cutting grass and hedge trimming? What about these residents that have had cars or have left old cars in their gardens that have gone rusty and the weeds are sky high and it's just so awful for their neighbours? What can we do about this? Or have we got a pocket of money aside where we can go in after so long and clear the mess up and kind of issue a warning that if this happens again, they just can't be residents of the council anymore? I know that sounds a bit harsh, but we are in a state where we have got some people that just, I'm not saying they can't cope, I'm just saying they won't cope. And they're using it as a dumping ground and don't seem to mind what it does, how it upsets the neighbours or how it upsets other people in the area or us, because in essence, it brings down the value of our property as well. So there's so many sides of looking at this gardening thing. And I do believe, I'm sure that some of them can afford to pay a gardener because they may be on various benefits, but it's amazing what they can afford to do, which is nowhere near as important, in my opinion, as keeping property up to date and looking good. That was why I was asking this business of this transfer of money from, as Councillor Knowles said, from one place to another place, and why are we doing it?
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Before we move forward, could I ask both Councillor Reid and Andrew Cotton, is this a scheme that you want to implement this year?
It is a scheme that's ongoing, and I do want to continue to put a budget forward for next year. Chairman, if I'm happy to see that we provide ESK's criteria a little bit further, but 1.7 in the report does actually show you what is for grass and hedge cutting, and what is just for hedge cutting as a service. It's more the illegibility is part of the quest of what we're asking to have a steer on, as well as actually what services are implemented.
Right, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Amanda next and come to Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Philip made a very valid point about the cost, and it is quite shockingly high. But also, I think for environmental reasons, we should be cutting less often and not more. And certainly, if we're looking at charging tenants for the costs, there should be the option for them to cut far fewer than the recommended 14. And also in terms of, I think it's great that there's an assisted garden scheme. I think it's a really good thing. Is this just for council tenants? Is it something that could be rolled out for other vulnerable people who aren't living in council properties? For example, well, And certainly for empty homes as well, you know, when a home's left empty and the garden's neglected, like Rosemary says, it has an impact on the rest of the neighbourhood. So I would say, if we're looking at the scheme, could we look at extending it to other people across the district, and certainly think about the environmental impact of cutting as many times as we are? Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Who wants to answer that?
I think we've got a piece of financial criteria by either Richard or Andrew that we just need to add before we answer the questions. Am I right?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reid, through you, Chair, of course. It's just to clarify in terms of the charge and eligibility. And clearly, this isn't a compulsory scheme, and any tenant in one of our properties, if they found someone to do it cheaper, they could absolutely do that. There's no requirement for them to have the service, which is why that means that it's not like a service charge where you'd see in a block of flats, for example, or in sheltered housing. It's very much the tenant's choice to make a decision whether they would want to sign up for this scheme or not. I guess the difference being at present, because it's not charged, there's no, that's not a very difficult decision to take. I'd suggest if you're a tenant, then you would sign up for it. So just thought it was worthwhile just making that point.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, obviously it's finance, so I can't resist but get involved in the debate, even though it's not my report. I think it was just worth emphasising that the kind of principle behind this is about who should pay. So at the moment, the HRA pays. So it's a bit like, I guess on general fund side, it's a bit like green waste. Should it be a tax charge across all residents? Or should it be only those that benefit from it? And at the moment, the way that Robert's described it is it's a charge across the HRA. So effectively every tenant pays for it in some way. So the heart of this debate is really, should it be narrowed down and focused only on those that actually opt to choose to take that service and aren't in a position to pay for it themselves, or should all tenants contribute towards it, which is the way it's currently being positioned? And Andrew did make the point, but it might have got lost in the conversation, was there will be no benefit entitlement for those that choose to pay but have difficulty kind of subscribing to it. So through the benefit arrangement, there would be no direct financial offset for those residents, so they would have to find that money themselves. So, but as Andrew's correctly saying, it's not an imposed charge. So those suggested rates at the top of page 13 in paragraph 1.8, the tenant could choose not to take those, could choose to take the responsibility on themselves, but could choose to go and get somebody else, a man with a lawnmower type arrangement, and do it themselves directly outside of any regime that the HRA has imposed. So I just thought it'd be helpful to contextualise what really the debate's about. It considers it is currently as a charge across, or as being proposed today, narrow it down to those that are actually directly benefiting from it.
Thank you, Richard. Any further questions from members? Amanda.
Thank you. Just following on from that, the green bin charge is a charge that people pay for all properties if they want a green bin. But am I right in the assisted garden scheme is only for council tenants? Yeah. So my question still remains, could it be something that other people in the district could sign up for and then agree to pay the cost if they need to, or get it through benefits if that's relevant to them?
Thank you. Who's going to answer that? Andrew?
Yeah, I think that'd be a significant project for us potentially, because that we are, the driver for this is our landlord-tenant relationship, which is clearly, different to the sort of council-resident relationship, and we are able to administer the scheme through housing officers who are engaged with tenants anyway. So in terms of making it a broader scheme across the district, I think there'll be considerable additional costs, I suspect, in terms of administering that.
Councillor Reid.
Where other tenants, to answer the question, is for other people other than council houses, council tenants, that would be a contractual arrangement between ESK themselves, which do offer a service, I understand, and the individual client, not anything to do with our SKDC housing function.
Thank you very much. Philip.
I was just going to say that very point that ESK are looking to do private gardens as part of their expansion of external work. It came to pass at the company's meeting yesterday that for enquiries that they have, they win 50% in number, but only 30% in value. So they're winning small ones, they're not winning big ones, but they are out to try and get as much private garden work as they can to add to their portfolio. So any private garden work would not come through the housing scheme here. It would go direct between ESK and the private tenant.
Thank you.
Thank
Any further questions? If I could draw members' attention to page 14, there are three options. Option 1, pass on all costs to tenants as outlined above. Option 2, part subsidised, or option 3, subsidised fully, but only to those who meet strict eligibility criteria, which for me is the main concern, to make sure that those people who are unable to cut their grass, unable to cut their hedge, maintain their property, do get help. So I'm going to go to the recommendations now. Do you want to come in, Philip?
Can I make a proposal that we defer that discussion until we've had details of the costings? As Robert Reid has said, he's not looking to do it this year. It's looking to put it in the budget for September next year. So we have time to consider the costings when we see them, and then we can make a judgment on whether the numbers we are shown are appropriate, beg your pardon, and whether we feel that they should be subsidised, part subsidised, wholly subsidised, or non-subsidised, when we have a better handle on the numbers. So I would propose that we defer that particular part of the discussion until we have those numbers.
I mean, you make a valid point, Philip, and I'll say our next meeting is not until October. Would both Councillor Reid and Andrew be willing to postpone these proposals until the next meeting?
I think there's two things here. One is about the cost and expanding on that. Get that straight on the head. We can come back to you on that in October, no issue at all. The other steer, though, that's in this report that we would like a steer from you people from, and it would be helpful if we had it today, is the eligibility, which is what's in those options. Is it that we're going to leave the charge that it's a general cost, so the HRA? Is it going to be an individual charge, or what are we actually going to do? And that's clearly shown here. And I understand the costs and the criteria of the costs, but the eligibility, I would have hoped we could have had an answer on that, to be fair.
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
To be helpful, Chairman, it's the options that are in 3.1. Can we get a steer on that, whether we're going to pass on all the costs to tenants as outlined, whether we're going to part subsidise or we're going to subsidise fully, but only meet through a strict eligibility criteria? And I think there's a proof in that asking that the last one.
Option 3, but obviously I'm open to members, so I'm going to propose option 3. Do I have a seconder?
Sorry, thanks, Chairman. I'm not seconding at the moment. Is there an option 4, which is continue with the scheme as it currently is? No, option 3 is subsidise fully, but only those who meet strict eligibility criteria. At the moment, we're subsidising it fully to everyone, and that's not an option.
I mean, that's what the problem is, isn't it? That's why the cost's gone up so much. It's because we've got extra people asking for it and they're not paying for it.
Right, I'm going to go to my proposal, which is to adopt option 3. It's been seconded by the Vice Chairman. I'm going to go to a vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you. Sorry, Amanda. We're now going to go to the recommendations. The recommendations on the front are that the committee considers the content of the report and its background to the current assisted garden maintenance scheme, if you've done. The committee provide comment and question on the options around eligibility and recharging for the scheme to inform consultation with current users of the scheme. And the last recommendation is that the committee, subject to suggested amendments and consultation, indicates its support for the adoption of the renamed assisted grass and cutting scheme, which I think I'm going to propose that we accept those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Jackie, all those in favour? That is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We move on now to item 9, compensation policy. Who's going to speak on that?
Okay, I can be quicker about, or more expedient, I think. This is really, it was put forward as a draft. It's really a scoping paper, to be fair. So SKDC is committed to making sure that we meet all of our housing related statutory compensation payment obligations. In addition, we also recognise that there may be occasions where the service fails and a discretionary compensation payment may be appropriate, such as inconvenience caused or as a gesture of goodwill. The discussion paper before the committee sets out the grounds and the basis upon which compensation may be awarded in relation to the statutory obligations and gives examples of types of discretionary payments for member comment and discussion. It was in the papers that have come out, were in the supplementary ones that came out, which are on page 17. And I must say, Chairman, if I can just at this point, I'm really sorry to members that when they had their agenda, then they've had all of these supplementary papers that have come out since. I have a reasoning and a rationale behind why this has happened. We have new directorates in post, we have had personnel changes, and it is a rationale of actually getting all of these departments to work better together. And I'd like it to be known that the Directorate of Housing has needed to put a lot of pressure to actually bring these papers together, and we look forward to a more coordinated approach for the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Reid. I'd like to comment as well, because normally we have perhaps 4 or 5 items on the agenda. Today is quite exceptional, and I don't intend in future to accept more than 4 or 5 on the agenda unless it's just an urgent agenda item. Have you finished, Councillor Reid?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Open to questions now. Any questions from anyone? No questions at all. We'll go to the recommendations then. And the recommendations are that committee notes the content of the report, the examples of compensation that may be paid, and provides comment as appropriate. Well, we didn't make any comment much. 2, that the committee, subject to suggested amendments, indicates its support for further work on the housing service compensation policy and associated processes prior to submission to the Cabinet. I propose that we accept these recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Knowles. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on now to item 10, breathing space. Who's going to report on this one? Councillor Reid. Claire. I don't think we've met you before, so could you just introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Claire Moses and I'm the Head of Revenues and Benefits.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all too. This report is to give you an introduction and also a background to the debt respite scheme, which is better known as breathing space. The scheme came into force on the 4th of May of this year, and the legislation was laid on the 17th of November last year. The regulations require, there's two elements to the regulations, and the first one is with regards to breathing space, and then there's the mental health crisis moratorium. And the requirement is that as creditors, we were asked to introduce the regulations to ensure that we are able to support any residents or any debtor that has an outstanding debt within the council. So not just within revenues and benefits, but within any service where a debt is raised. The standard breathing space gives residents 60 days where we are not able to contact the resident within that time, and we do not take any recovery action on any of the debts that have been identified. That's in place now, and that came in on the 4th of May, and a resident can only have a breathing space within one breathing space in each 12-month period. The mental health crisis moratorium is something that requires secondary legislation, and we were expecting that to come through this year, but with everything that's been going on, we do expect that that may be delayed. The mental health crisis moratorium is a lot more stringent than the breathing space, and it does require a lot more support from debt advisors, and it may mean that we don't actually recover any debt for up to a 7-year period. But once we get more information on that, then we'll be coming back to this committee to update. In terms of the breathing space, since November or even before then, we've had a project team in place which is led by myself and 3 other members of the Revenues and Benefits team. We felt that it sat within Revenues and Benefits because the majority, if not all of the debt is related to council tax or rent. So we've set the project team up. We received notifications from the insolvency service, and they advise us who's the debtor and provide us with information so that we can send an email out to the rest of the teams. And they undertake checks within their system, and they will update us to advise whether or not they've got a debt that's sat with them. At that point, every service that does have a debt knows that they're not to contact the debtor. Any information that is raised within the 60-day period, it goes to the debt advisor. So for example, if in that 60 days, the debtor advises that they've had a change in circumstances with their housing benefit, then that change of entitlement letter will go to the debt advisor and not to the debtor, so that they have a complete breathing space from any contact from the council. Once we've undertaken that, we ensure that the debt advisor is contacted, and if the debt levels are different to those that we've been advised of, then we can update them to ensure that they've got a full picture of the level of debt that person has. Since the regulations came into force, we've got 23 residents that are in breathing space. Of those, 13 have a council debt, and it totals just over £33,500, and that's in paragraph 1.5 of the report. The level of debt ranges between £335 and a little over £7,500. So there's some serious levels of debt within there for some of our residents. The next steps for us, the first 60-day period ends on Monday, on the 5th of July. So as a service area and as a council, we then need to make decisions and start thinking about how we support those debtors once they come out of breathing space. And that's to have a look to see, do we want to take it back to the point before breathing space began and we continue recovery of that debt, or do we engage with that debtor to ask them what they've done within that 60 days? Have they looked at other ways in which to reduce the debt, and we can engage with them? What we haven't wanted to do is make assumptions leading into this next step. We've made some assumptions in the first 60 days, and we have altered the way in which we undertake the work, learning from the information that we've been receiving. So what we will do is contact each of the debtors, and we'll be working through it on a case-by-case basis as to how we support our debtors going forward. What I would like to do in the report is just draw the attention to the equality and safeguarding implications. After having a conversation with our safeguarding officer, Carol, we have had quite a lengthy conversation with regards to the actions that we're going to take. And I've just mentioned those in terms of taking a case-by-case basis approach. And what we would like to do is bring the report back to the next committee so that we can advise that for those cases, these are the actions that we've taken, and hopefully draw up an approach that may put forward a future action. This does actually link in with our fair collection and debt recovery policy, which is also under review, and it may form an appendix or an action within that policy. A real whistle stop in comparison to some of the other reports this afternoon, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. I mean, there's nothing worse to be than being in debt, and people who are in debt and hide that debt. And certainly the debt keeps building up with nowhere to go to try and get some advice, apart from citizens' advice, I suppose. But it's good that we are looking at that and trying to help people. In fact, I'd encourage you to publicise the fact that we have helped people, and we are here to help people get their debts down and clear their debts. The speaker, first speaker is my Vice Chairman.
Thank you, through you, Chairman. The 60-day period, we have no ability to contact that debtor. So the debt advisor, which could be citizens' advice, step change, money advice, they have to be a registered debt advisor. And it's their requirement to look at the debt and put in some support mechanisms. So it may be that they contact utility providers to look at repayment. We have had a few that have come through where they've applied for a debt relief order. So they are supporting that debtor and hand-holding them through that 60-day. And that's really where, at the 61-day point, that's where we then want to pick it up and engage with that debtor to then say to them, okay, well, these are the actions that have been done. How then can we help you moving forward? Not just for that debt, but then also ongoing debt that will, or liabilities that will be created. A 60-day for us means that in a normal circumstance for council tax, we would have issued a bill, we may have issued a reminder, and we may have then engaged with that debtor to look at a repayment. This 60-day, if they don't engage with their debt advisor, they've delayed that action by that period of time. And what we don't want to do is just compound the debt issues. We want to make sure that we have that engagement with them.
Thank you very much. Amanda, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's great that we're doing this, and I also think it's great that you're coming back to the next meeting, because obviously the 60 days is up tomorrow, did you say? So it'll be really interesting to see out of the 23 where they're now up to. I just wanted to go back to 1.3 and the two different types of respite. One was the standard and one was the mental health crisis. I would imagine that quite a lot of the people who fall under standard may well have mental health issues, and they may be not getting treatment. And I'm just wondering if there's a way of bridging that gap, because it says a resident can only access breathing space once in any 12-month period, whereas with the mental health crisis, there's no limits. And I'm just wondering, with the status of mental health at the moment and the difficulty with getting treatment, what we're going to do about people who perhaps are going to fall between the gap.
Thank you, through you, Chair. That's a really important point, and I think more so over the last 15 months, it's significantly highlighted that there are mental health issues, and people may not necessarily know that they're in that circumstance, and these might be the first steps of actually approaching that. Certainly the debt advisors are well trained in picking up these issues and identifying. So although the mental health crisis moratorium isn't there, they will know that they need to provide additional support, contact crisis teams and other teams that can support them. As I say, at the point of the 61 days, and it's good to come here before that, because my mind's ticking already about the things that we need to be thinking about, and those will be the certain things that we look at. Our officers are well trained and very aware of picking up on certain things that are said, and as was alluded to with some of the other reports, picking up those other areas of safeguarding and other issues that we can look at. Our teams are now going out to properties, and they are also speaking to people on the phone. So often, a drop of information can give us a lot, and we can understand that there might be more behind some of these issues than just that they can't pay. And as I say, as I keep talking and keep listening, I'm thinking of actions that we can start thinking about.
Amanda, you make a very valid point there, because under Section 137 of the Mental Health Act, a person could be detained and not realise that they're in debt due to the state of their mind. So it's, we have got people out there who do need our help, but don't know they need help. Next person is Rosemary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I've been looking at these figures, and my question basically is, it beggars belief that probably one person, and this is why I'm questioning it, can get £7,761 in debt, and how on earth have we let that happen? And obviously, as Amanda's referred to it, any of these people are going to be worried sick, so they're going to have mental health problems just looking at the figures. But this particular one, and it does say individual debt ranges from, I just don't know how we've managed to let it get that bad or that far, because obviously whoever it is needs help. And
I think the problem is, Rosemary, that we can't control everybody's life, and people do have to take some responsibility. As I said earlier on, there may be people who can't control their lives, who don't know how to control their lives, and it's good that we can intervene as well. Have you got any,
can I come back, Mr. Chairman, on that? Because yes, intervening's fine, but we should have been doing it earlier than letting it get to £7,761.
I'm going to let Claire answer that question.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. I do appreciate that is a high level. And to be fair, the breathing space, it really has come in at the right time for our debtors, certainly. We've gone through a year where our recovery methods have stopped because of COVID. So in usual circumstances, we would send reminders out for non-payment of rent and for non-payment of council tax. We'd also send potentially summonses, and they're the kind of triggers that would let people get in touch with us, and we would have those conversations and we would engage. We haven't done that, and unfortunately we have seen circumstances where levels of debt over the last 15 months and particularly last financial year have risen significantly. Prior to that, we do engage with our residents, and we do go through a recovery process, quite a rigorous recovery process. But we just do have some residents that just don't contact us. We do go out to visit, we send out correspondence, we telephone them, we email them, but they just don't contact us. And I'm hoping that this will, because there's a formal way of them getting that independent advice for that 60 days, I'm hoping it does have a positive impact. And if we can do some analysis of those 23, if they've got a history of older debt, we can maybe have a look and see, have they contacted us in the past, or is it really the breathing space that's pushed them to seek that support?
Thank you very much, Dee. That's very good. I'd like to bring in Richard now. You wanted to speak, Richard?
It was just really picking up on the point that Councillor Trotter made and what Claire's just made is that just to be mindful, the committee is aware that obviously a lot of these interventions and support the council's been doing for years, and it's not, please don't think we've only just started to respond in this way. This legislation, as Claire said, has come at a very fortuitous time anyway, because the government were already thinking about this in light of recent events. But in terms of our debt management, you know, we collect £70 million worth of council tax, 25 million of rents, 40 million of business rates. We're all the time engaging with the community and listening and supporting and having repayment arrangements and helping them individuals manage their household budgets and their bills. So this is a bit of a kind of icing on the cake over and above the work that already is undergoing in those teams, and we're happy to bring back further kind of analysis around that and further examples of how that's already embedded within those teams. And I think it is timely for our debt management policies perhaps to be reviewed and updated to reflect the circumstances and a different approach to, as has been said, to avoid people burying their head and hoping it goes away, because a lot of our debts, of course, are ongoing week by week, month by month. It's not as if someone's bought some white goods and they're afraid to kind of meet the bill. These bills unfortunately go up and up and up because that's just the nature of the taxes. So it's very important we have a good dialogue and a good communication with our community and encouraging people to come forward and talk to us. As we all know, and it's all in any utility company says the same, just pick up the phone, talk to us, and we can help you come to some kind of arrangement. So this is something over and above what is done on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to make sure the committee are kind of aware of that.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. I think it's the fact that we're here. People should know that we can help if they need that help. Hilary, did you want to come in?
I would actually quite like to say thank you very much to SKDC, because I'm really surprised in the last year that there are only 23 people and 13 with council debt. So there must have been a lot of communication going on under these circumstances. And also, is there any statutory need for the person in those 60 days to contact somebody to try and help them, or do they just get 60 days left?
Claire, are you able to answer that question?
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, within that 60 days, there is an obligation that they do engage with the debt advisor. So if they've approached Citizen Advice, for example, then they would engage with them to look at ways in which they can reduce their debt level and seek other support. No, the debt advisor, the debtor can choose who they want to go to. So if they want to go to their local Citizens Advice, or if they want to go to a national advisor such as Step Change, it's up to them who they approach. They do, yes, they must go through a regulated debt advisor to go into breathing space.
Good, thank you. Rosemary, you want to come in?
Yes, very quickly on that last one. When you say that they've got to go to a debt advisor, how do you notify them that they're going to? Does somebody actually go and see them and say, this is the problem? You've got to go through a debt advisor because we're not allowed to contact them? Or how do you do it? I'm thinking of people that could be dyslexic, probably can't read letters, certainly don't do emails, hopefully pick up the phone. So these people are said, you have to work through a debt advisor, which is fine, and I agree with all of that. But I am thinking of the people that can't read, certainly can't assimilate what's going on half the time. And I know you put them in the mental stream probably, but I know, and can I also ask on this 7,000 one, could it be a business that's got themselves in that state? Or are we just talking about individuals living in properties at the moment? Sorry, I'm very worried about people not understanding what they have to do. And I certainly, if they're in debt to this extent, I wouldn't have thought they'd been able to have emails. They probably haven't got the equipment to have it. So it's very odd that we can't contact anyone for the 60 days breathing space. But that's obviously the law. I don't know.
Claire, do you want to respond to that question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the support and the information that is available, the debt advisor will provide the support and advice that is needed to that debtor. For us, we will engage, so we will be able to respond to any enquiries. The debt advisor can contact us at any point. If a debtor contacts us, say we send somebody a council tax bill and they say we just simply can't afford it, we would always offer to support them in other ways, but we would make them aware that there is breathing space available to them and what their options are, that they can contact our local citizens advice. We've got a very good relationship with one of the officers at the local office. There's been a lot of publicity nationally around this as well. And as I say, particularly with it coming around, within the last 6 months. With regards to the debt, it does include businesses if they are a sole trader, but it doesn't include limited companies. And this 7,000 debt is for an individual, and it is predominantly rent arrears and council tax arrears.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any further questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't know whether I'm confused here, but I'm sort of relying on your memory as well. Stop the knock.
I just wrote that down, actually. Stop the knock. Yes.
Is where we have discussed, and presumably this is a follow-on from that what this criteria actually is stop the knock for 60 days. And that's what's come out from earlier
You're
communities.
quite correct, yes, because if you remember, some of the members on the committee weren't here at the time. We had a big debate in communities on stop the knock on debt relief, and that to me is the same thing as that Cllr is telling us now. So yes, you're correct.
I suppose.
Sorry, yeah, just help. Yeah, stop the knock was more of an initiative and a kind of ideological kind of thought process. It wasn't legislation. It wasn't something that was imposed on the authorities. It was something the authorities were encouraged to look at. Whereas this is in some way superseded it because this is now legislation and we're responding to that legislation. The stop the knock was more about enforcement agents and how the council wants to use and interact with its enforcement agents. So in many ways, it's become over consumed by this legislation that's here before us today.
So this is an improvement on the initial suggestion then?
It's a more developed and enhanced version of what we talked about previously, yeah.
Good. Are there any further questions from committee members? No, if not, I'll go to the recommendation then, which is only one, that the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the introduction of the debt respite scheme and the arrangements that have been put in place to enable the council to respond to the legislative, sorry, my eyes are getting a bit weak here, requirements, and also to report back at a further meeting with another report. Are we all agreed? Good, thank you. We'll now move on to item 11, and we're coming up to 3:45. Does anybody want to take a break at 4 o'clock? Because I'm trying to finish this meeting by 4 o'clock within 2 hours. So are we happy to continue? Good. So item 11 then, which is corporate key performance indicators. Who is going to lead on that?
So I'll lead on that report, Chairman, if that's okay.
Who's talking?
Ken.
Oh, Ken.
It's Ken Lyons.
How did I
Sorry,
you were going to be there, Ken? Welcome.
I've been unusually quiet. So
yeah, welcome. Anyway, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the report that's set out in front of the committee today is the outturn or the Q4 position of the 2021 corporate plan performance indicators, which fall within this committee's scope. And they were approved by this committee on November 2020 as being the indicators and actions that that were appropriate to monitor the progress of the action plans, really. So, and this is all about delivering the corporate plan, which was ultimately to achieve the vision of being the best district in which to live, to work, and to visit. So we're going to be reporting the corporate performance reports regularly to scrutiny committees. So you should get used to seeing these actions and their key performance indicators, and we'll bring you updates outside the meetings as well, as and when required. So mainly I'd like to draw your attention to Appendix 1, which sets out the progress against the actions in there. And I'll just give a quick overview. So 9 of the actions that were in this committee are rated as green, which means they're currently on track for delivery. 7 are rated as amber, which means they're not currently on track, but there's a mitigation plan in place that's fairly robust to bring it back on track, or that there are key performance indicators that's within 10% of the targets. None of the actions are rated as red, which would mean that they're not currently on track for delivery and there's not a robust mitigation plan in place. However, some of the individual KPIs are, but as I say, we believe that their contribution to the action, there's a plan in place to help them achieve. So I'm just going to draw the committee's attention to a few things, a few highlights from the report. But when we come over to questions, generally there will be officers from the relevant departments or cabinet members who'll be able to respond to those rather than me, although I might chip in with some of the community's responses if there are any around that. So just an overview of a few highlights. So on the positive side, we've made strong progress towards progressing the mental health challenge. I think this committee knows that we set up a mental health working party, and it's probably worth just drawing attention to the role of Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Trotter as part of the mental health working party, who are really supporting moving that forward together in a very focused team way. The second is that we are one of only 3 authorities to have a 5-year housing land supply that's been confirmed through an annual position statement, which is obviously a very positive position. And thirdly, I'm going to draw the committee's attention to the work around embedding the activity of the SK Community Hub and taking that forward, and also as an opportunity to just remind members and plug the SK Community Awards, which are currently ongoing. And we've had a really good response to these so far, with over 80 nominations, but they close on the 18th of July. So please do encourage people in your community to nominate. But some of the work around the community hub and embedding that work is progressing really, really well. However, there are some challenges. So for example, if you look at the number of new homes completed with the district or the number of affordable homes delivered, they are lower than planned or expected. We believe that a lot of these are related to the temporary slowdown in the market due to the pandemic, and we're expecting them to come back on track during the year, but I would highlight those as being areas for the committee. And there's some elements within the repairs, reporting the achievements of repairs completion times that have been issues that have been partly related to issues related to IT systems. So some alternative options are being explored. So, and just a final thing to note before I hand over to questions. So we set out the corporate plan in October with always a plan to review it after 12 months and particularly to refresh if when it came into monitoring and management, any of the KPIs or targets weren't actually appropriate. So when we next bring this back in November, we'll do a full review of that first year, but we'll also give committee the opportunity to consider making any relevant amendments to the KPIs or targets if they believe those are appropriate. So that's my overview, and I'll hand over to the committee for questions, if that's okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Ken. Members may not be aware, but on page 40, point 1.5, we've been advised at 2 that figure should read 7, and number 3 should read 0. That's correct, isn't it, Ben? Good. Thank you. So I'm now going to open up to questions from the committee. Are there any questions from the committee? None at all. Amanda.
Well, I mentioned some questions earlier, and I don't know whether they come here or if that's later in the work plan, just about empty homes and voids. Where do I throw those
No, we'll
questions?
concentrate on this item.
No, I'm
only.
confused. I just don't know where they come, those questions. I'm just reminding you, that's all.
Yeah. Congratulations on your mental health involvement as well. That was a very good challenge to the committee and yourself. So I'm really pleased with the way that worked out. So well done.
It's great. We're really enjoying it, aren't we, Sarah?
So, Councillor Wheeler, it would be appropriate to raise those as part of the performance report if they're related to the corporate plan. If you wish to, Councillor Wheeler, if there's something relevant to that report.
Sorry, I'm just very confused because I don't know what's corporate. It's the words. Forgive me. I don't know what's corporate and what's not corporate. Okay, so let me ask the question and then you can shut me down, Chair, if that's okay with you. Obviously, it's to do with housing. We have a shortage of homes in Stamford and we have issues with empty homes and rough sleepers. And I'm just wondering where we are with our voids policy and our empty home strategy and whether that can be tied in. If it's in the wrong time, sorry, if it's to
No, that's a
mention it
very
now.
good question. Can I go to answer that?
So actually, with the voids policy and the empty homes policy, I think Andrew and Richard are both in the room, so they may well have other things to add, or Councillor Reid on that. But yeah, those are questions that we're able to answer here, I think.
Yeah, Councillor Reid, you indicated that you can answer that
Thank
question.
you very much. Always welcome to answer any questions in whatever format. We'll always get there, Amanda. Okay, so I'd like to answer, if I may, the question about voids. And I know there has been some interaction between the member and the director where empty homes are. So where voids are concerned, a lot of the long-term voids, to give you an up-to-date state, I'm honestly not looking over my glasses, I can't see part of things about. So a lot of the long-term ones have been sorted out. So our monitoring and our rating has improved. What we've also done is we've brought major and minor voids together rather than separate them to actually see that the work on voids is more coordinated. We have drafted a policy. It should have been, in all fairness, with you today, really, and it should have be going to Cabinet in July. However, what has happened, and I'm sure you'll appreciate, is that I have a new director. I have not just a new director, I have a director. And this is one thing that he has shown me to be quite specialised and knowledgeable in. And the voids policy that we were going to bring, quite frankly, we can make a better job of. So that's I'm being very honest there, but we are bringing it, and it will come. But to say that we haven't brought the updates to you is one thing. More importantly, the number of voids and the turnaround length of voids has significantly decreased because it does two things. It gets people into empty homes and it helps our housing revenue account with the collection of rent. I hope that answers the question, and I'll hand over to Andrew for any revisions on what I've said and also to talk about empty homes because I know there's been some interaction.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. So there is a measure in for empty homes actually in the pack on page 57 there, which is showing as green, which is clearly great. In terms of empty homes and the work that we've going on, very helpfully, Councillor Wheeler, you've shared with us an example, and we've met to discuss that. What we've done is we've put together a working party of officers from a few different teams to look at that, including a colleague Cllr from the point of view of revenues and benefits, because that's really helpful information that Cllr's got access to. We've met as had an initial meeting, which has looked at some of the things that we think should be in the strategy, thought about some of the metrics and ways in which we could look at the empty homes, and we've asked a member of that group to draft up a strategy for us using some best practice examples to think about different ways and the appropriate methods of bringing empty homes back into use across the district. So work in progress, and we'll be happy to provide an update when we get to that draft strategy point.
Do you want to come back, Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, lovely. Thanks. It's great to know they're in progress or whatever. Just in terms of dates for when you come back, will it be at the next meeting, do you think? Is October realistic for us to have something to look at then? Oh.
Yes, I think we'd be happy to come back to, you know, subject to agenda length, etc. Happy to come back at that point. That would sound appropriate.
Thank you very much indeed. Sarah.
Yes, absolutely. One of the reasons for us getting together as a group was to try and understand, you know, what are the trends or what are the circumstances that we're finding in South Kesteven about why properties stand empty. And I think that's Claire was able to bring a lot to that discussion in terms of understanding the council tax position, and certainly it's typical, you know, for probate, for example, for properties to be empty for a while. I think what we'll come together as a group and look at in some detail is those real long-term empties where they're empty for, you know, for years, and think, you know, for us as the Strategic Housing Authority, we want the stock in use. So how can we make that come about, whether that's an offer in terms of, you know, us helping and enabling the property back into use, or thinking of other powers that we have. So we look forward to bringing that back to the committee for a discussion.
Thank you very much, Steve. I've just got one quick question for Ken. On page 51, you've got here a number of council homes that have solid fuel heating replaced, which is 80. Can you tell me, Ken, are they being replaced with electric heating?
So I'll revert back to the cabinet member or the director of housing for that question. But just to say as well to the committee, the empty homes measure is something that we're expecting to revise in the annual review, following the work of the empty homes strategy group that was just mentioned. So we'll have a measure that reflects the progress that group expects to make. So just to update committee on that. But Andrew or Councillor Reid, would you be in a position to respond to the question about solid fuel?
Yes, happy to inform committee on that. In terms of the solid fuel, you know, existing solid fuel systems, certainly the best option or the cheapest option would be for gas, if that was available. Clearly, we've got a lot of areas of the district that are on the gas sort of grid, in which case it becomes a question of looking at options around solar with modern, efficient electric storage heaters, or air source heat pump, depending on the nature of the property and the sort of individual property layout and the characteristics of the property, what would work best. So there's some options there. Clearly, we need a high quality survey and working with the tenant in terms of the best option for that property. And of course, we're supported by the Green Homes grants, where we won an award recently of over 900k to be spent in this financial year. So those surveys are rolling out now, looking at bringing those properties up to date in terms of the heating systems.
Thank you very much, Steve. Andrew, Philip, you're next.
Just a brief comment, if I may, Chair. It's probably a good job that Councillor Gill is not here, because terms like a lot of and much reduced don't satisfy him a great deal, and he asks for numbers to prove it. And so when you come back with the vote, can you have numbers and not just a lot of and much reduced and other similar comments? Thank you.
Your comment is noted. Are there any further questions? Oh, Rosemary.
Yes, my question, I hope somebody hasn't already asked it because I left the room for a small time. What's happening about the land where the police houses were, would have at long last been demolished? The previous cabinet member reported to us at one time that he'd been up to Yorkshire or somewhere and they'd seen these mobile homes that were going to be picked up and brought down and popped into place. And he was hoping we'd have 4 of those on that site very, very quickly. Now, I know the houses have been demolished, thank goodness, but we don't, as far as I know, seem to have had any progress in moving these other homes, which, when we were told about them, sounded to be extremely efficient and would have helped the housing problem we've got.
Thank you, Rosemary. I think we're moving away from the actual topic of the agenda, but I know a person who can answer that question for you, Councillor Reid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, very quickly then. Where I'm going to wear 2 hats. The first hat is housing. We have got 3 schemes that are currently coming forward. We have Wellington Way, which is at Market Deeping, and there is a question lurking, so I'll very quickly say that will provide 4 2-bedroom flats, 5 by 2 bedroom bungalows, and 4 2-bedroom houses, which we're moving forward on. Swinegate is at planning at the moment, and that is going to provide us with some extra help with our sheltered housing accommodation, and that will be 20 units of 1 and 2 bedroomed. And we are looking at Shore Road as a third option. Now, the reason I mention those first and foremost is because the police houses site is another site, okay? I have mentioned it on several occasions, and I am nervous at this point. I'm hoping I am responsible at this point, and I've mentioned it on several occasions. I need the results of that stock condition survey, which council approved the expenditure early, thank you, last December, to actually know how I balance what capital monies are spent on more housing to be actually made and committed to, and that money that both capital has to be spent on our existing stock. So the police housing bit falls sort of after that. With my property portfolio hat, which I've just gained, it is one of the assets at this moment in time I am actually looking at disposal because I need within my asset strategy to make sure that, to make the council assets work harder to actually make us fit for purpose of what we need and the way forward, and actually have a bit of radical movement to actually make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It certainly is a town centre topic of why nothing's happening on that site. So thank you for those updates. Thank you, Rosemary. Are there any further comments from members of the committee for Ken? No. Thank you very much indeed then, Ken. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and I promise I'll join in person next time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If I could draw members' attention to page 39, there's only one recommendation, and that we note the contents of the 2021 performance report. Thank you. Now, item 12 is the work programme. The normal procedure now is that we note the contents, but I'm happy to take any questions from any member. Amanda.
Just bearing in mind what was said about the empty homes and voids, can they be added to the work programme for October? Is that the right place to do that? Or is that, I mean, I don't know.
I have seen it on there somewhere.
And also to get a feedback from Cllr as to the breathing space.
Yes.
Yeah, for October as well. That would be great. And can I just ask, do the big housing projects get reviewed? I mean, I know there's planning, but when we're supposed to be building homes, does that come under this committee? And if so, do we get to scrutinise?
What do you mean by big?
Well, like, for example, the Garden Village in Grantham or St Martin's, whatever in
I can't answer that. I
Stamford.
know Councillor Reid can.
That's really planning. That's not here. I do have a couple of remarks when you allow me to for the forward programme.
Well, yes, thank you. Any further comments on the work programme? Is there anything you want to add extra to this, Councillor Reid?
Thank you, yes. And also to answer the two questions that I don't think have been fully quantified for one of your members. One is the homelessness position. Owing to time and length of time, I didn't spend any time on an update. I will do that for you at the next meeting. However, you will be pleased to know that we now are in receipt of 2 4-bedroom houses in Stamford, and that they are going to be altered so we can look after a provision in the south of the county. We also have received notification of future forward funding from national government, which means that the partnership of which we lead, as you well know, between the 4 districts of North, South, Severn, South Holland and West Lindsey, is we are now being able to continue to make it a more the continuity to move forward, and I'll give a report on that at the next meeting, as indeed I'm being asked to do that at the Housing Health Advisory Care Committee at County as well. Secondly, next and last and finally, Chairman, I often give an update because it's something that members do like to know a lot about, is a disabled facility grants. So as we know from governance and audit, there was an outturn and there was an underspend in the environment of what's going to happen to that to actually help in our housing stock. But of course, we will at the next meeting be able to have the outturn of the first quarter. So when we have the next meeting, it will be good to share with members what we've actually done and achieved in the first quarter. Because you say to me the next meeting is in September or October? October. Well, that's fine then. Up to speed, I should be able to give you a 6 months report because September will be 6 months.
Councillor, can you tell me on the disabled facilities grants, it's split into 2 still? Are those grants above 10,000 and those below 10,000?
Yes, it is. And it is also what's means tested and what's not means tested as well. And that criteria remains the same. And of course, it's not just about stair lifts and house adoptions and those sort of things. It is also about occupational health therapy, which is so vitally important to the back door to our people that go into hospital to actually being able to come home, which is dear to all of our hearts. Anybody that goes into hospital, the first thing they ask is when can they go home? And that's what we're trying to do with these grants, get people home.
Certainly the delayed transfer of care is a big issue with both ULHT and also North West Anglia Trust, so that's good to hear. Are there any further comments on the work programme? Nope. I'm now going to declare, I've got no urgent business, so I'm going to declare the meeting closed at 6 minutes past 4. Can I congratulate you on